I think we can start already. Yeah, all good? Okay, let's start. It's been 3 minutes. All right. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Nina from Native Teams, and I'll be your moderator for today's session, New Asia, New Rules, Navigating Compliance and Talent in 2025. First of all, I want to thank everybody. Thank you so much for spending a part of your day with us. We're really excited to have you guys here. But as many of you guys know, Asia is one of the fastest growing regions in the world. Half of the global population lives here, but it's also one of the most complex places to hire and manage people. What works globally doesn't usually, translate locally. Having that in mind, I'm thrilled to have two amazing speakers with me today. So we have Danielle as a Eurasian with the roots in both Western and Asian culture. Danielle brings an insider's understanding of how people leadership and culture intersects across region. As an international HR expert, she's helped global and regional companies navigate with complex realities of managing teams in Asia, from deferring employment laws to unspoken cultural clues that define workplace successes. Also joining with me in this call is Bala from Native Teams. Bala has extensive experience already helping companies expand across Asia through compliant hiring models like EOR, and he'll also be sharing some real on-the-ground insight into what's really happening in hiring landscape for 2025. Today, what we're aiming for is we'll unpack what makes Asia such a unique and exciting region and share some practical insights that hopefully you guys can apply if you're hiring or managing teams across different Asian markets. So just a quick overview of what the agenda is going to look like and how we're going to spend our time together. I'll start by, giving a quick overview of a big picture of the new Asia, what's driving the growth in the region and why it's important, and why not one size fits all in this region. Then we'll hear from Danielle, who will also share her experience as HR and culture consultant working with teams across Asia, from leadership styles to employee motivations. After that, Balo will then cover from Native Teams. Together, we'll just talk about, the real world hiring and compliance challenges that companies face based on, how our day-to-day experiences are, and plus how the EOR solutions can make expanding in Asia a lot easier and simpler as well. And the last part of the session, we'll just, go through a quick Q&A to make sure you guys drop in your questions. If you have any in the chat, just let us know. Okay, so let's start off with the big picture of Asia. So let's start with the big picture. When we say Asia, typically it's easy to think that it's one big market, but in reality, it's a collection of different countries which has its own economy, regulation, and work culture. Like, for example, India is one of the leading the way when it comes to digital talent, innovation. Singapore mostly is focused on regional hubs for compliance and finance. The Philippines is also thriving as a global service and remote workforce hub. And Indonesia is one of the fastest growing when it comes to the youngest labor forces in the world. So when business comes in with having the mindset of having a global playbook, it often usually doesn't fit here for us. And that's where the understanding of, local nuances becomes a really real advantage. So to dive deeper into that, I'll have to pull in Danielle, who's worked closely with companies navigating HR and cultural differences across the region. So Danielle, you've worked with companies and people all over the world. Why is it important for companies and leaders to understand how work values and employee expectations differ across Asia? What do you think?
Yeah, so thank you, Nina and Bala and everyone. So it's like you said, right? Asia is really diverse. So that means that we cannot apply a one-size-fits-all approach, right? So before I kind of really dive in, because you will hear me make some generalizations, I really need to put a disclaimer out there before you quote me on anything, is that when we talk about being culturally sensitive and intelligent, which is really at the heart of a lot of what we're going to be talking about, is that this is not about memorizing generalizations as a rule or a label. It's really much more about setting the context in which we can consider the differences that might exist amongst cultures, right? So these are patterns and trends, not absolute rules, right? Just like the way every country is different, every person is different as well, right? And we need to respect those differences as well. So
Yeah.
therefore, something I would like to warn about when it comes to cultural intelligence is to, assume these generalizations in a too firm way. So whilst I'm helping you today to simplify your understanding, the aim is really to invite your awareness of possible
Yeah.
differences to help us to navigate that incredible diversity that we have in Asia and New Asia, and help us really to equip bridges across different cultures. So in which way is Asia really diverse? Also compared to maybe some of the regions and countries that our participants are coming from or have more experience with. So if we take Europe, for example, as a kind of a baseline as well,
Mhm.
their countries in Europe have centuries of intertwined history, right? And with the
Yeah.
EU established, the countries also have a shared legal and social foundation, right? Or take the
Yeah.
US, another, big region. The
Yeah.
US has different states, but has one constitution, one federal system that unites them. So if we look
Mhm.
at Asia, though, which we like to use as a kind of like a broad term, every country, and I mean literally every country, and we have quite a few of them, has evolved independently. There is hardly any shared political, legal, or cultural foundation. Of course, we do have things in common, but each of those systems reflect its own history, faith often. We have a lot of religions, different languages, and social values, right? So let's take Singapore and India, both, ex British colonies, right? So we have British legal roots, we have a common law structure that gives us the way our legal system operates. But what we see in practice is that Singapore, because of its leadership, has evolved to focus a lot on efficiency and meritocracy, a system of, where performance matters. But India, because of its history, has evolved into a system where beyond, the original British roots, social justice and inclusion really matters, right? So we get systems with same roots, but going into a very different direction. Or let's take, Philippines, which has more of like a Spanish Catholic um, uh, history, and later also American. We see that we have English business norms, but
Yeah.
the sense of fairness and such are really important there, right? And then we can go on and on about it because every country is different, right? Um, so what does that really mean for employers? Let me get to, the gist of my point is that when we look at something being different, what we often perceive is that it's very complicated, right? And it's therefore very easy to call it bureaucratic and kind of dismiss it as complicated bureaucracy. But what I want to encourage you to think about in terms of compliance and our labor laws and market practices is that these are actually, the history and values of people, the collective values of people of that country embodied, right? It's a product of that. So the way we can kind of turn that thinking around is to not see that as just as red tape, but also as a guide to what people in a country consider to be fair, moral, and respectful. So for you as an employer, the first thing you can do, before you even think of doing intercultural training or cross-cultural training, is that it is a compass for you how to behave correctly and, signal that respect to gain the trust of your employees in that country, right? And really that is what those laws or compliance that sometimes can seem a bit complicated to manage, can act as a guide for you. So, and then acting according to those rules, those values will help people trust you to stay and also then to thrive, right?
Yeah.
So that is what I really would encourage you to do.
Thank you, Danielle. But how does these historical, and cultural roots actually shape what people expect from their work?
Sure, and I've thought about this a lot because I spent a lot of time in kind of both Europe and Asia, and the markets here have evolved so much that maybe like 1 or 2 decades ago, we would consider some countries like developing countries to some extent, right? But many
Yeah.
Asian economies are now middle, even high income, right? Singapore is fully developed, India's booming,
Mhm.
Indonesia has moved into kind of upper middle class income status. So, um, even though we are not talking about, developing economies anymore, what I see in comparison is that the people, um, the mindset as a collective, right? Again, we're talking about generalizations here that do not necessarily apply to everybody, but is not quite as post-materialistic. What that means, so, after, first you need to get comfort in that status, and then comes the more like the goals of self-realization and fulfillment and that kind of thing, right? So unlike in
Mhm.
Europe where we're seeing much more of that amongst, employees and what they care about, here I'm seeing a little bit less of that shift, and work and income is still much more about providing security, right? Rather
Mhm.
than self-fulfillment. And people are still working on building stability. And this is where it's very important, not just for themselves, but also for their families. So when we think about employees in the Asian context, we need to think of them also in kind of in that like family unit, which will make it very interesting when we talk about benefits and things like that. And why is that? Why is there still that difference? So first of all, we have a huge population of people here,
Mhm.
right? So we have millions of graduates, um, but
True.
education and opportunities are still not equally distributed. So there's a lot of competition for good jobs, for good education, that kind of thing. We do not have the same level of safety nets, like with a social security system, like in Europe, for example. So risk taking is still considered much of a luxury, right? Um, and then we also live more in uh, employees are part of some sort of family units usually,
Yeah.
and that usually goes a little bit beyond kind of the nuclear family unit, husband, wife, children. Sometimes it's even multi-generational with parents and grandparents. So their voices carry weight as well, and they also carry in them um, experiences that might warn them, to choose something reliable and not to take risk, something respectable. So they also have, multi-generational experiences that kind of influencing those decisions, but also they might not have had such a privileged life, right? So they need the health care, the pension, the insurance, kind of that financial security that the employee through their work is also providing, right? So career choices can really be like family choices as well, right? To
Yeah.
create that stability across the generations as well. So yeah, I think that collective mindset is something that, when we just see the employee as an individual turning up to work, that we might miss. So that family duty as well is really, it goes above the self-expression for many at this stage, right? Um, so what does that mean when I choose who I want to work for, what kind of job I want to do? Is firstly, the reputation of the employer is a huge factor, right? That brings honor and credibility. And secondly, like I mentioned, that, following the rules, following compliance, that gives credibility and trust to an employer too, right? If you give hint at signs of that you might not be quite reliable, not quite playing by the rules, that can also scare, employees off.
The employee. Yeah.
Then, uh, then, um, then I think something that I also notice is that really quick career progression and the titles really matter as well, right? So that is also a way of like securing upward mobility for the family, also to show outwardly that kind of credibility to, the family, the society. I feel that that matters a lot as well. And then compensation, of course, right? Like no one goes to work for free, but I feel like it has like even more importance, that the compensation is is good and that it is improving, and it's really not greed, right? I think sometimes we see it as that, but it's really that responsibility for for themselves, and the expectations to take care and plan long term that comes with that as well, right? So um first that basis needs to be secured.
Yeah.
Then I think there is some that is like more on a, like I guess a macro scale, but from a cultural perspective, like we said, the countries are very different, and what I see sometimes is that people, coming from abroad or interacting with different cultures also have assumptions about, oh, what is the religion here, what do people do here, and I would say they can differ widely, and part of our job as like kind of foreign employer or leader coming in is to really understand what the kind of traditions and rituals and practices are that my team, at a aggregate level, or but also as an individual level, really cares about. And my encouragement is really like not to assume, to ask and observe and listen, um, and not to think, oh, I'm in this country, hence the religion of my team is probably so and so. But yeah, really to look out. And even within religions there is nuances, right? How
Yeah.
families practice things, right? So,
Yeah.
and therefore something that I talk about also a lot in my social media is holidays, right? Because I think that is a very important like embodiment of those traditions. And let me give an example, right? I've worked a lot for European and American headquartered companies. So what typically happens is things like go dead during Christmas. Yeah, Christmas, Thanksgiving, after November, December, things go really quiet. So we had a critical situation once where we really needed to reach the CHRO to make a decision to to something, and they were off, right? We could not reach them, even even with the importance of their position. And that was absolutely fine. No one, questioned that, and that's just how it is. It was just kind of shrugged off, that was, no one was going to call them out of their holiday either, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but then just a few months later, we had Lunar New Year, right? Or some say Chinese New Year, which is celebrated in huge parts of Asia. And then the majority at that time, Chinese team had to execute on a huge restructuring. So not only had the team that need to, actually pull it off, they couldn't take time off. They were burdened with the stress, but also they had to call in employees during their, kind of reunion dinners and holidays, and to let them know that they have lost their job, right? Um, and that is not necessarily bad intent, but it's a bit of a double standard, right? If you kind of put one celebration
Yeah.
over the other. And so
Yeah.
what I see is that we see these global calendars, especially with kind of European and US headquartered companies, are typically unconsciously built around what I would call like Western holidays, right? So we care about Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, but we are not watching out for like Diwali, Lunar New Year, Eid, those kind of celebrations. So I feel we could be more sensitive by giving them equal, worth, or especially for the people who care about them, right? So to have that awareness. Um, so I think that if we want to be genuinely inclusive, we need to show that curiosity, and that is, really understanding how does my team or my employees, how do they celebrate weddings, births, deaths,
Yeah,
mourning is a big thing, right? What are their holidays? And to support them, and that is, a key to building that trust and respect, and also to, like I said, the family unit, to understand that they exist within networks of relationships, not just as isolated professionals. And that may sound very overwhelming, but the point is not that you need to know everything exactly, but to show that willingness and curiosity to find out and to understand. And I think that curiosity, that genuine curiosity, can create a huge, immense loyalty and respect, that there is
that's
no
true.
other better way to create that.
That's true. I actually agree with that 100%. We experience the same here as well. Even if in we have like Asia is usually categorized as one region, right? But
Mm.
again, there's like different practices and cultures that we also have to respect and all that. I agree. So Danielle, how can companies actually like adapt to this? Like what is like HR doing on the leadership practices look like in Asia? How does that work out?
Yeah, I've spoken a lot about the why and kind of given the context. I'll try to explain a little bit more on the how to make it a little
Sure.
bit more practical, right? So I think when you deal with Asian teams, or as a HR professional, we try to, we often operate in kind of playbooks, policies, and my encouragement is not to just like translate those, but to see, to really understand how people operate on the ground to make it work, right? So first of all, we need to understand that the way Asian teams communicate and work together. So
Mhm.
they tend to be very collaborative, but also careful. That means that it's important to align with authority, to kind of move up the chain, and to get that consensus. So sometimes from coming from abroad, that looks like being slow. But actually, what they're doing is to really get that buy-in, right? To whatever they are doing to make the likelihood of successful higher. And so what you can do is to make clear how decisions can be made, and to empower, to make sure that the people are empowered to make those decisions. So to make that really clear how they can do that. Then another thing is like, webinars like this can be quite a good example as well, right? In terms of how much people engage and ask questions. Um, People might not speak up as much as you might be used to in other cultural contexts, and but it doesn't mean that silence is disengagement, right? um, but something I see in kind of when we have international things being rolled out in this region is that kind of top down, a plan comes and the local team says yes, okay, we agree. They do not aggressively question it or criticize it, and then because it's not really quite right, they quietly adjust behind the scenes to make it work locally, and they create some
That's
sort of
true.
workarounds, that is actually quite complicated, just to make it work for you, because they also want to save people from embarrassment, right? So they fix it without that confrontation. So how do we deal with that, right? So my encouragement is to and this probably takes a bit of trial and error to find your style and to find your team style, because like I said, we cannot generalize everything, but it's, as a leader, or as HR, we need to create an environment where we lower the risk of speaking up, and we try to find different ways of getting people to express themselves. So you could, for example, say like, oh, instead of any questions or comments, like, hey, do you think something might be missing from your side, you know? And also to when people do speak up is very important that we, we do not get defensive, right? We thank them and really
Knowledge.
um, don't make them feel like they risk something by speaking up. That is very, very important. Um, so, you also because we also maybe have feelings about what is being said, but not to be defensive in any way and keep that really open stance. That is, I think also makes a difference. But like I mentioned also a few times before, is that when we deal with these intercultural communication situations, it's not like we can say, oh, do A and then B comes out, right? It's not just do's and don'ts, but I think it's just keeping that position of genuine curiosity, asking questions, but trying different ways. And we will get it wrong sometimes, it will not always work, but to kind of keep trying, observe, how people around you are interacting, how you might be able to adapt some of that style to invite more openness. Um, and yeah, so, but I think it's really more also having that position to be aware that your way or your lens isn't the only one, right? That that you have that awareness. Um, so so like I said, when it comes to like HR policies, try not to just localize your policies, but localize your understanding. And I think when you even if you do things wrong, when people see that you respect them, um,
Yeah,
you earn that trust, and people will become more and more open. It will naturally follow. Um,
true.
so yeah.
Agree on that one. Sometimes you also have like expat HR, and then even when they try to really understand, even if they, like what you said, even if they don't get it right, but just the effort
Mm,
of trying to understand of how that culture is actually, like being run and how that culture actually
mm.
works, they really appreciate that already. But since you've already touched up on leadership, what would be the key challenges for leaders, I would say, especially for those new to Asia, might encounter, might encounter when leading Asian talents for the first time?
Hmm. Yeah, so I think good leadership I mean that counts in general, but I think in the intercultural context we have a additional layer of complexity or something we need to be sensitive to, and like I already briefly touched on. And I think firstly that is like self-awareness, right? And so leading across cultures means also really understanding yourself, in that context.
Yeah.
So noticing yourself, how you behave, and also maybe in comparison to others, but also noticing the biases that you might have, right? Um, who do you naturally feel, more trusting towards? Who do you listen to the most? See if there is some patterns that what you like, your natural inclination, but
Hmm.
that also means in turn, who might you be missing, right? Who might you be overlooking? Typically, people closest to us that we exchange with, communicate with the most are those who are fluent in our own language, right? Whether that's English or closer to our like cultural style, right? Um, and that's very natural, but it's also risky when we're trying to lead an international team, because we overlook those that we are, not naturally listening to. And maybe we also overlook those quieter, which is the slight risk in the Asian context as well, that, we're structurally overlooking people. So whether or not we notice it, our employees notice it, even on a subconscious level. So and this is this point about, why representation matters, right? Like in the ads and on the billboards, that kind of thing. And similarly, it's like that. In companies. When we are an Asian team and we perceive that only non-Asians are leaders and getting promoted, that sends a silent message that success still has a foreign face. Yeah. And it quietly sends a message, well, I don't think I have a chance, right? Um, so I think that's very important. And, as HR, I tend to look at those kind of things in terms of numbers, and noticing whether there could be any biases or skewness. But as a leader yourself, you can, observe how you or your fellow leaders are making decisions there as well. um, then, like I said, when you bring that self-awareness together and you observe any biases or representation, I think that's a very, very good first step, right? Um, and as a good leader, I believe, especially in international context, is that you you are responsible for building bridges, right? So you are a, a guest or, in a new culture. So you are learning a new culture. But your employees may also be foreign to your kind of headquarter culture or your culture. So you can be, reverse mentor them in terms of how to navigate the culture of the organization, and how to communicate and things like that, just like every employee needs to, can develop those skills, right? So you
Yeah.
can mentor local talents, but also be an advocate for them, to help them voice their ideas and get visibility for their ideas. So I think in two ways you can support them, and but you can also learn from them, right? The cultural context, but also how they are communicating effectively within the context of their culture, right? To understand, how can I navigate what we call like high context cultures, right? How do I get people to express themselves and such? So I think by observing you can learn a lot as well. um, so yeah, I think in summary, that is how, I think good leadership could look like. And people will see that you're trying, right? And they will meet you halfway there
Halfway.
because they will try to learn about you as well. They want to do their best. So
It's a two-way street. I agree. They have to they have to meet each other halfway.
yeah.
That's true. Anyway, thank you so much, Danielle, on this one. It was a really great perspective. Now let's shift the gears a little bit, and talk about what happens on the ground when it comes to like hiring and compliances. So I'll push the mic a little bit over to Bala, who's basically covers most of the businesses expanding into Asia using our EOR services. So, Bala, maybe you can start also by explaining what you call, like compliance island. What are the main challenges companies face when hiring across different countries in Asia?
Yes, definitely. Firstly, thanks, Nina, for being an amazing host today. And also appreciate you for picking up this very important topic because while you already see there are so many geopolitical changes that is happening across different parts of the world, especially with the new H-1B visa changes, and there are protests going on related to immigrants. I strongly believe that Asia has a bigger picture now to look at, and companies may definitely want to expand here. And thank you, Daniel, as well, for sharing your valuable insights. It's always been a pleasure learning from the other side, and try to resonate how it looks like, so that whenever I have a chat with another business owner wanting to expand into Asia, I can closely tell him how and what are the best ways you can actually expand into these markets. But I would like to bring in a bit more insight on the ground level, precisely what actually happens when companies try to hire and operate across Asia. So, like
Mm.
like you mentioned, Nina, a little while ago, when we say Asia, it always sounds like one region, but in reality, it's 48 different versions of compliance. Like in India, we have different laws, state by state, whereas Singapore has strict and precision driven regulations there. With Indonesia, there are constant changes related to their holiday policies, payroll cycles, etc. So each country functions in its own compliance piece. familiar, but I mean, they're familiar in language, but completely different in rules. So mostly businesses, when they're entering into Asia, they often underestimate these kind of challenges, especially from an operational standpoint. They assume that it could be fairly easier because when we talk about it, in the open, we always refer to EU as being one of the most, complex driven compliance laws. But when it comes to Asia, it's generally taken leniently, but it's actually not, because there are different changes that happen time to time, especially when you're looking to expand into Asian markets. The foundational beginning is at by and setting up your own entity, and that itself could take somewhere about 6 months to a year, depending on which country you're looking to expand into. Apart from that, there are also various other challenges like employees being misclassified, or contributions not being regularly paid up in the local funds, breach of tax laws, and these eventually boil down into major fines, and it stalls growth to a major extent. Even companies that are recently raised a huge amount of funding can also go through a major shutdown when it comes to in compliance with their current structures and processes. Now, when it comes to particularly with the compliance islands that we talk about, so like I mentioned, these reputational risks are something that companies should definitely look into, and that's just something that I wanted to share as a feedback.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. I love how you put it, actually. You're a compliance island, 48 different policies here and regulations when it comes to when it comes to staying compliant here in Asia. But yeah, this is exactly what companies experience when they actually first try to expand in the region. You might think you're following the same process across the markets, but suddenly you're dealing with different reporting timelines. Like as you said, Bala, there's like different tax rules. It all becomes complicated. Also, there are even local holidays that can also affect the payrolls, because holidays here in the Philippines and India, like in Singapore, etc., these are all like different across all.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, let me share a quick story. I had a quick conversation, I think 2 weeks back, with a European tech firm, and they wanted to hire a few developers in India and Vietnam, and they were ready to roll. Until they actually realized like setting up entity would almost take them close to a year. And I've seen that firsthand, because I know how much hassle we had to go through to set up our own entity in Indonesia. So in such situations, having an employer of record solution, helps a lot, because such solutions help you onboard instantly. They are fully compliant, legal, and you don't have to touch even a single government form.
That's true. So we've also, like what you said, like these are just one of the examples that we've encountered when you were dealing with it. But we've seen so many startups in the exact same situation. They have to move fast, but the entity setup can take months. Sometimes, depending on the country, it can even take up to a year. Bureaucracies and whatnot. But yeah, using an EOR really bridges that gap. Especially if they really want to, they have the talent already, the entity is not yet ready. They found the right talent, but then the paperwork and everything else can't catch up.
Yep, absolutely. In fact, just to touch upon another topic. So while you mentioned hiring the right talent, right? Like these talents could be based out of anywhere. And you could be a US based company or a EU based company, and you might have your own set rules and guidelines onto even, let's say, the frameworks on your benefits side of things. And this at times may not land well, because it could be different in different countries. So your benefits program, or your idea of having a benefit provided to an employee, could differ from US to Asia. Like in Asia, in Philippines, there is 13th month pay. In India, we have flexible, work from home policies, and, much linear, customized local contracts. So they, sort of help you much better. And overall, I mean, making even the payroll more seamlessly without having to change your whole global systems could actually be a better solution, which is something that is offered by EOR partners as well.
Yeah, that's actually a powerful point, Bala, because it's true. What motivates employees here in Asia can also be different, with countries in the West, and what motivates them there. So customizing benefits, like 13th month pay, flexible work options, like you said, for there in India, shows the company that truly understands, like what Danielle also explained earlier. We have to truly understand and be genuine and understand the local expectations, and that really builds the loyalty. So with an EOR, companies can adapt those details locally without changing their global structure. It's usually flexible, but at the same time, it's compliant.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I mean, there are at times where, business owners can face a lot of invoicing delays, or, there could be tax confusions. They might miss deadlines, obviously, because HR is not the only part of the business. That's just, something to manage and keep the business growing. So during such situations, like converting them into EORs, or hiring them compliantly as local employees can be far beneficial to and amplify their growth as well, because you're exposing yourself to a larger spectrum of talents and not just being concealed to just a particular region.
Yeah, I think we've said it that it's clear that while the opportunities in Asia is pretty huge, the rules and the realities can shift so quickly from one country to the other. It's just really sometimes very different. So anyway, speaking of shifting, I know you've been closely also tracking how the compliance itself is evolving across the region. So maybe you can share us what business trends should we be watching out as we move into for 2025, the rest of 2025.
Yes. So, uh, I mean, these compliance are not just specific to Asia per se, because I speak to, companies that are based out of US, that are based out of EU and Asia.
Yeah.
But there are some compliance trends that I'm seeing, especially when it comes to workers' classification. And this is something that I generally, recommend most of my prospects to, vet through before making a decision, because governments in particular countries like India, Malaysia, they are tightening definitions when it comes to employee and contractor, and such kind of missteps can trigger back taxes and penalties. And we've already seen so many cases that are coming through, where employees are misclassified, and the companies end up paying huge fines, and that in itself stops them from their future growth. So that's one. The other few things that I've seen is like AI and data protection. That is something that is relevant to almost every other industry, and that's also relevant in the global employment piece as well, because hiring tools are now using AI, and having local data, storing them has become more of onshore. So that's one. And apart from that, transparent payroll. So we can expect the payroll to be more transparent when it comes to breakdown of certain line items. For example, like
Yeah.
even taxes, benefits, or your overall insurance contributions and things like that. Moreover, which is something that even Danielle touched upon, is the employees' expectation. So apart from the overall, ecosystem of providing a greater workspace, offering, I mean, having gender equality laws, etc., but having more of, having compliance is more become a legal and a cultural responsibility. So compliance today isn't just a checklist; it's a part of your employer brand altogether.
Agree, 100%. Anyway, thank you for those. Thank you for those insights, Bala. So listening to all that, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are also thinking, okay, this sounds really complicated now. So where do we even start? It sounded easy, but now it's complicated. So that's where
So
native teams actually steps in. We make it simple for companies to hire, pay, manage their talent anywhere in Asia, while we still stay compliant with all the local laws. So Bala, can you walk us through this, please?
yes, so we're not just an HR platform or an HR or a tech platform. We're, your compliance and payments co-pilot for Asia, not just Asia, but we also cover the other 120 countries overall. So let me give you a brief about what Native Team does. So we essentially, hire, pay, and manage people in all markets where businesses don't have to essentially set up their own legal entity. So we handle everything right from the local payroll, tax obligations, government reporting, label managing the labor laws according to aligning it with the contracts. Then overall, benefits plan and everything. So if global expansion sounds like, let's wait until we sort out the legal stuff and then move ahead, like you don't have to do all of that. You just have to reach out to us and we can get you up and running in less than 7 days.
Oh,
Yeah. So yeah, so I also I was just making a note on the side. I wanted to put this across to our viewers as well before I forget. So we're offering a 50% off on the EOR fees if you reach out to me or Nina, and we'll help you expand globally without having to face any kind of hassles.
all right. Thanks for that, Bala. All right. Okay, so I guess now we'll move into the last part of the session, which is basically the Q&A. If we have any other questions about hiring, compliance, or managing teams in Asia, guys, please just drop them in, and we'll go through. I think we already have like a few questions here. Give me 1 second. Let me just quickly check. Okay, let's start off with this one. I think, Danielle, this one is more for you. How do leadership expectations differ between, say, India and the Philippines?
Okay, that's me. That's ironic because Nina and Bala are leaders in their respective countries. But I guess I can provide a bit of it's sometimes hard probably to perceive yourself, but like kind of like outside in view of some of the differences that I have perceived. But like I said, it might not apply to everyone. So I think what Philippines and India would probably have in common compared to, let's say, in Europe, is that there's quite a high power distance. That means that there is a respect for that hierarchy and rank. But where I perceive it to be a little bit different and nuanced is that in India, the managers will tend to be a little bit more directive, just kind of say like what they want you to do, more authoritative. Whereas in the Philippines, maybe they are focusing more on that relational piece, right? To seek consensus as well, and maybe a little bit more sensitive to the emotions. Um, whereas, in India, maybe it's a little bit, the communication is a little bit more formal.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think that is roughly how I would describe the difference. And the leader in India is more like a authority figure. When Whereas in the Philippines, the way they approach the relationship with the team is maybe more like a protector and a nurturer, maybe, right? Like, so a slightly different approach. If you kind of look into the communication and relationship with the team. I don't know, how do you feel about, like, do you feel like that resonates with your own
It does
experience?
actually. At least the one that you've shared for the Philippines, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Bala?
Yeah. What
I,
do
of
you think?
course,
How
I mean,
about
I
you?
have my leader on the call here, so I, of course,
Yeah, I have to be very careful with what I'm saying, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I feel like, I need to do like a little psycho profile of the both of you. No, just joking. But yeah, do you feel, Bala, like, do you feel that that's true? Like, do you perceive leadership in India to be like that?
no, I don't think. I mean, honestly, my views have been quite different in the sense that I've had a mix of experience, both working under a leadership with an Indian Spock and now with a Filipino. So
Mm,
I see there's a fair amount of similarity, but it's very
mm,
subjective because at the end of the day, it's a human, and how you
exactly.
interact with them and how they contribute, or how much are they willing to contribute to your growth is what matters. Because I mean, as an individual, when we
Mm,
look out for our leader, it's always for
mm,
support and guidance to move forward.
mm.
And I believe it's very subjective, and fortunately for me, I'm in a great place right now. So uh, thank you, Nina.
I love that.
That was there you go. He was being careful with his answer. Okay,
Yeah.
so I have another question here. Bala, I think this would go for you. How can EOR models help mitigate these legal and administrative risks?
Right. So when it comes to the EOR piece, right, like the first and the foremost foundational piece is having an owned legal entity. So when we act in as an employer of record, we have our own entities there, and we are onboarding these talents onto our entity. So we basically, as a part of our business offering itself, ensure that compliance, legal aspects, payroll, everything is covered. So we also mention it in our contracts explicitly that we indemnify all of our customers from any kind of legal and administrative risk to a certain extent, because we are the ones who are responsible for managing those operations, being a local partner to our customer based in that country.
Got it.
Yes, and as someone who's worked with both multinational giants and fast-moving startups, I can tell you that Asia rewards those who respect compliance and especially local culture, and not just who move fast. Because if you think global employment is complex, wait until you try it in Asia. But with the right partner, it can actually turn out to be your biggest opportunity.
That's true. I think this one's for you too. How does the 50% offer work?
So it's for the hires that are happening across Asia, and the best advantage about this offer is that there's no limitation to the number of hirings. So you can hire
So
anywhere within Asia, because our topic for today is about the new compliance, new rules of Asia and the compliance laws here. So we're keeping it more focused towards Asia. I mean, extending this offer towards more of Asian countries. And of course, we do operate in other countries as well, which you can always reach out to us and get to know more.
okay, I think we're off to well, we have roughly few minutes left. Danielle, I'll forward you this one. So what's the right approach to offering recognition and reward across different Asian countries?
Oh, okay, that's quite a big one for quick last minutes. But yeah, what comes to my mind is that you need to be a bit sensitive towards the differences in the team and the country. Some countries they will feel more comfortable with very like public recognition, whereas in others, maybe something a little bit more personal and private. So I think even just that recognition, is it known to everybody or less known, is something to look out for. Um, but I think what will work very well is leveraging the hierarchy, right? So that it comes from a leader, that it's somehow personalized and genuine, heartfelt, and thoughtful in terms of recognition. I think those those are factors that help to really reinforce the appreciation of reward. Like I spoke about, the celebrations, the holidays is a very important point to support that in your benefits offering and the flexibility to understand what your team needs. Like, for example, for different rituals or prayer times, fasting, celebrations, all of that good stuff. So if you do not offer full flexibility already, then at least to customize options to that. And then about the rewards, the talent market is very, very competitive and moving fast. We have a lot of great talent. They are ambitious, they want to earn well. So you need to really have a gauge how the market is moving in terms of compensation and benefits as well. So your numbers from last year might not be up to date. The percentages of increase for the market overall may be higher than what you're seeing in some other countries, but also what is your expectation of your top performers, right? How fast do they want the increases? So that's something to budget and plan for, which is definitely something in the region that we see has very strong acceleration that that you might not be used to the same extent as in your some of the other countries that you have experiences with. So I think to really attract but also retain your top talent and performers, that's really important to think about as well.
Agree. We still have a few more questions, but I think that's all the time that we have today. So, guys, big thank you to both Danielle and Tibala for sharing their expertise, and of course to all of you for joining us today. So, as we know, like as we mentioned earlier, Asia is full of opportunities, but to be honest, the success here really comes down to understanding what the local context, from compliance and to culture as well. So if you'd like to continue the conversation and learn how native teams can support your growth in the region, feel free to just reach out to us directly. As Bala mentioned, I mean, take opportunity of that 50% for also the other one that asked. So thanks again, everyone. We'll respond to the remaining questions that you guys have posted privately. And then, yeah, have a great weekend. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you,
Thank
Nina. Thank you,
you.
Daniel.
Bye.